4 years ago, Alex had stood in this very spot, albeit under much different circumstances. Back then, he wasn't the billionaire he was today. He was still a rising entrepreneur, fresh off a series of investment wins that had made him a young multimillionaire. His name was making waves in the business world, but to the old money families of the Ambassador Yacht Club, he was still an outsider, one of those new money types that didn't deserve a seat at their sacred table. He had applied for membership with excitement, believing that his hard work and success had earned him the right to step into these spaces. It wasn't just about leisure or prestige, it was about breaking into circles where real power was exchanged, where billion-dollar deals happened over champagne and sailing trips, where politicians and CEOs whispered secrets that shaped the world. That night, he had walked into the club wearing his best tailored navy suit, his confidence as polished as his shoes. He had been prepared for formalities, for protocol, but he hadn't been prepared for what happened next. The receptionist, an older man with a silver nameplate that read, Richard Alcott, Membership Director, had barely looked up when Alex approached. "Good evening, sir. I'm here for my membership interview," Alex had said, offering a polite smile. Richard had finally lifted his gaze, his eyes scanning Alex with an expression that was neither welcoming nor neutral. It was assessing. "Ah," Richard had said, clearing his throat. "Yes, Mr. Carter, is it?" "Yes." Richard adjusted his tie, offering the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Unfortunately, I'm afraid there's been a change in our membership policy. The board has decided to prioritize legacy members, families with a long-standing history with the club." The words had landed like a slap. Alex had read between the lines instantly. "You don't belong here." His jaw had tightened, but he had forced himself to remain calm. "That's interesting," he had replied evenly, "because I was told my application was approved for final review." Richard had given him another insincere smile, the kind that one gives when trying to dismiss a problem without confrontation. "Yes, well, there must have been some miscommunication. I do apologize." And just like that, Alex had been shut out. Not because of his money, not because of his success, but because he wasn't one of them. He had left that night without saying another word. But deep inside, a fire had been lit. They thought they could keep him out. They had no idea what they had just done. The rise of Alex Carter. From that moment on, Alex stopped asking for a seat at anyone's table. Instead, he built his own. The rejection had fueled him like nothing else ever had. Over the next 4 years, he turned his company into a global empire. Real estate, technology, private equity. He conquered every industry he touched. He expanded, acquired, and dominated, amassing a fortune so vast that even the old money families who once ignored him had to take notice. And then, he came for the Ambassador Yacht Club. The club had been a fortress of exclusivity for nearly a century. Owned by a private trust, it had always been passed down through generations of the same elite families. But things change. Alex had been patient. He had waited for the perfect moment, watching, observing, waiting for a weakness. That moment arrived when he discovered that the club was struggling financially. Membership had declined, maintenance costs were rising, and younger generations weren't as interested in yacht clubs as their predecessors had been. The board needed a bailout. And Alex had the money. At first, they resisted selling to him, but money talks. And when he made them an offer too good to refuse, they sold. Now he owned the very place that had once rejected him. A reckoning at the Ambassador Yacht Club. The heavy wooden doors swung open as Alex stepped inside. Every eye in the grand foyer turned to him. The room was filled with the same kinds of people who had once looked down on him, Men in crisp linen suits, women draped in pearls, whispers of scandal already circulating through the crowd. But the most satisfying part? Richard Alcott was still there. The moment Richard saw Alex, his face drained of color. He scrambled from behind the marble reception desk, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. "Mr. Carter," Richard stammered. "Welcome to the club." Alex let the silence stretch, watching the older man squirm. Finally, he smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "It's good to be back." Richard swallowed hard. I wasn't aware that you were the new owner?" Alex finished for him. "Yeah, funny how things change." Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Alex glanced around the room, taking in the stunned faces of the elite members who had once dismissed him. Then he made the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex said, his voice carrying through the grand hall. "As you may have heard, I've recently acquired this club, and I'm making some changes." A murmur spread through the room. Alex let it settle before continuing. "Effective immediately, we will be removing the outdated and exclusionary membership policies that have defined this institution for decades. The Ambassador Yacht Club is now open to a new generation of members, people who have earned their place, not just inherited it." Silence. Then, the inevitable uproar. "You can't do that," an older man protested. "Oh, I can," Alex said, his smile unwavering. "Because I own this club now." The crowd erupted into chaos. Some members furious, others whispering in shock. But Alex wasn't worried. The old guard was dying out. A new era was beginning. And this time, he was the one setting the rules. The sweetest revenge. As Alex walked toward his private office, the same office that had once belonged to the men who denied him, he felt no anger, no bitterness, only satisfaction. The Ambassador Yacht Club had refused to accept him as one of their own. So he had bought it, and now he would rebuild it in his image. Because that's what power truly was. Not demanding a seat at the table, but owning the whole damn thing. If you loved this story, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. Because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The unexpected billionaire's power move. When a closed door becomes an open empire. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you love stories of revenge, power, and high-stakes drama, you're in the right place. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. Now, let's get into it. The rejection that changed everything. The night air was thick with the scent of jasmine and sea salt as Damien Cross stepped out of his Aston Martin, the metallic blue reflecting the golden glow of the streetlights. The Arlington Tower Hotel stood before him, a symbol of luxury, exclusivity, and prestige. A place where only the right kind of people stayed. Damien adjusted the cuffs of his midnight black tailored suit, his dark eyes scanning the lavish entrance. His expression was unreadable, but inside he was already playing the long game. He wasn't here as a guest, not this time. He was here to claim what had once been denied to him. Flashback. A night of humiliation. 4 years ago, Damien had been a very different man. He wasn't a billionaire then, just an ambitious young entrepreneur making his mark in the world. His investment firm had just hit its first major success, securing a multi-million-dollar deal, and he had wanted to celebrate. The Arlington Tower Hotel was the place to be, one of the most exclusive 5-star resorts in the city. The kind of place where celebrities, CEOs, and old money families gathered, sipping vintage wine and whispering about million-dollar acquisitions. Damien had walked through the grand entrance that night with confidence. He had money in the bank, an expensive suit, and a reservation for the presidential suite, the best room in the hotel. But it hadn't been enough. The moment he approached the front desk, the receptionist, a cold, sharp-featured woman named Claudia Sterling, had barely concealed her disdain as she glanced at him. He still remembered the way her lips pursed, the way her eyes assessed him. There was a hesitation before she spoke. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cross," she said in a voice dripping with fake politeness, "but I'm afraid there's been a mix-up with your reservation." A mix-up? Damien's jaw had tightened. "That's impossible. I confirmed it personally. I have the email." Claudia had barely looked at the phone when he pulled it out. "I'm afraid the presidential suite is no longer available." It wasn't about the room. It was about him. She had already decided that Damien didn't belong there. His fists had clenched at his sides. He could have argued. He could have demanded to speak to the manager. But Damien knew what this was. It was a power play. And back then, he hadn't had enough power to win, so he had left, humiliated, enraged, but more determined than ever. Because if they wouldn't let him in, he'd buy the whole damn place. 4 years later, a reckoning. The elevator ride to the top floor was agonizingly slow. Damien's heartbeat was steady, but his mind was a storm, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The hotel had been struggling for the past year, a secret that only those who really knew the industry could see. Declining occupancy rates, disgruntled investors, a desperate board looking for a buyer. So when the opportunity came, Damien didn't hesitate. He bought it, and now he was here to let them know exactly who owned them. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the rooftop lounge, where the hotel's elite gathered for evening cocktails. Damien stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Claudia Sterling, still dressed in her signature silk blouse and pearl earrings. But this time, she was no longer the queen of this castle. She saw him, and the moment recognition dawned on her face, it was delicious. It was. She fumbled with her wine glass, nearly spilling it. "Mr. Cross?" Damien smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "I believe the correct term is Mr. Cross, your employer." The color drained from her face. He took a step closer, just enough to make her squirm. "I hear there's been some mix-ups lately," he mused, tilting his head. "But don't worry, I'm here to make sure things run differently." Claudia's throat bobbed as she swallowed. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what was happening. He let the silence stretch between them before delivering the final blow. "You're fired." The entire room fell into stunned silence. The once powerful woman, the gatekeeper who had looked down on him, was now being dismissed like a common employee. It felt better than he had imagined. The new king of Arlington Tower. As Claudia stumbled away, her perfect composure shattered, Damien turned to the other executives and VIP guests who had watched the scene unfold. "Let's be clear about something," he said, his voice smooth yet commanding. "This hotel has a new vision. My vision." He took a slow sip of the whiskey that had been waiting for him at the bar, because, of course, they had been expecting him. No more outdated exclusivity. No more keeping people out because they didn't fit the mold. No more gatekeepers deciding who deserves luxury. He smirked as he scanned the room, watching the unease settle in. Because from now on, Damien leaned against the bar, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I make the rules." The sweetest victory. The next morning, Damien sat in his new office, the same one that had once belonged to the previous owner. The entire city was talking about what had happened. Some were outraged. Others admired him. And Claudia? She was already gone. As he leaned back in his chair, gazing out at the skyline, he felt something deeper than satisfaction. This wasn't just revenge. This was about power, because in the end, Damian Cross didn't beg for a seat at the table. He bought the whole damn thing. If you loved this story, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. More power moves, billionaire takeovers, and high-stakes drama coming your way soon. The fall before the rise. Eva Sinclair had been here before, standing at the entrance of the Beaumont Hotel, a luxury paradise draped in golden chandeliers, pristine marble floors, and velvet-laced furniture. She felt the sting of déjà vu. But this time was different, because 4 years ago, she had stood in the exact same spot, waiting to check in, thinking that her reservation, paid in full for the penthouse suite, meant something, but it hadn't. Back then, she wasn't the billionaire mogul she was today. Back then, she was just an ambitious, up-and-coming investor, fighting to prove herself in a world that saw her as less than. And back then, they had humiliated her. The night it all changed. She remembered the icy reception she received the first time she set foot in this hotel. How Gregory Langston, the Beaumont's manager, had barely looked her in the eyes when he claimed that her reservation was, unfortunately, lost. She had been polite at first. Patient. "There must be a mistake," she had said, showing her confirmation email on her phone. But Gregory had only smirked, his voice cool, condescending. "I'm sorry, Miss Sinclair. We're fully booked, but we'd be happy to find you a more suitable accommodation elsewhere." Suitable. The word had sliced through her like a knife, because Eva knew exactly what that meant. She hadn't been wearing designer labels that night. No diamond necklace, no flashy indicators of wealth, just a black blazer, tailored pants, and ambition burning in her chest. They had judged her, decided she wasn't the right kind of guest. She had felt the stares of the elite around her, the hushed whispers of people who thought they were better than her. And instead of fighting, instead of demanding to speak to a superior, she had walked out, with humiliation burning in her veins and her nails digging into her palms. But as she left that night, she had made herself a promise. One day, she would return. Not as a guest, not as a woman begging for a room, but as the owner. The ultimate revenge. Fast forward 4 years, and Eva Sinclair was no longer just an investor. She was a powerhouse, a billionaire. And when she saw that the Beaumont was on the verge of financial collapse, she knew it was time. The once thriving luxury hotel had been struggling for months. The stockholders were desperate for a buyer. And Eva? She had cash in hand. So she bought it. Every inch of it. And now she was back, walking through the same marble entrance with the same determined stride. Only this time, she wasn't just another guest. She was the one who owned the damn building. The reckoning. She took her time walking toward the front desk, savoring every step. The staff didn't know yet. Neither did Gregory Langston. As she approached, the new receptionist, young, bright-eyed, full of energy, smiled and asked, "Welcome to the Beaumont. How may I assist you?" Eva didn't answer right away, because out of the corner of her eye, she saw him. Gregory Langston, still wearing his pretentious 3-piece suit, still standing behind the front desk like he ruled this place. And when his gaze flicked up to meet hers, he froze. Recognition dawned on his face, followed by something else. Dread. Eva smiled, slow, dangerous. Actually, she said smoothly, turning her full attention to Gregory. "I'd like to speak to the manager." Gregory swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Miss Sinclair?" Ava tapped her manicured nails against the counter, watching him squirm. "That's right. And I believe the last time we spoke, you told me this hotel didn't have room for me." Gregory paled. He knew. Ava took a slow, deliberate step closer. "Well," she murmured, "I suppose it's a good thing I have plenty of room now." The receptionist looked between them, confused. "Miss Sinclair, are you—" Ava cut her off with a smile. "I own the Beaumont now." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Silence. Gregory gripped the counter, his knuckles white. That's impossible." Eva raised an eyebrow. "I assure you, it isn't." She pulled out a sleek leather folder, sliding it across the counter. "Here's the official purchase agreement." Gregory hesitated before picking it up, his hands shaking as he read through the pages. He knew what this meant. She owned everything. The hotel, the suites, the staff contracts, and his job. The final blow. Eva leaned in, her voice soft but lethal. "You know, Gregory, I remember the night you turned me away," she said, her tone almost casual. "I remember the way you looked at me, the way you spoke to me like I was beneath you." She let the words sink in. Then she delivered the final blow. "You're fired." Gregory stumbled back, his face twisting in disbelief. "Ava, please, this is not up for discussion." She turned to the stunned receptionist, who was still processing everything. "What's your name?" Eva asked. The young woman straightened her posture. "Samantha." Eva smiled. "Well, Samantha, I'm going to need a new manager," she said. "Would you be interested?" Samantha's eyes widened. I mean, yes, of course, Miss Sinclair." Eva nodded. "Good." Then, without another glance at Gregory, she turned and strode away, victorious. Because this wasn't just about revenge, it was about power, about proving that no one could ever shut her out again. The legacy begins. That night, as Eva sat in her private penthouse suite, the very one she had been denied all those years ago, she gazed out over the city. The lights glittered below, a reminder of how far she had come. She had done more than just win. She had changed the game. And this was only the beginning. If you loved this story, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. Do you think Gregory got what he deserved? Would you have handled it differently? Let's talk about it in the comments. And stay tuned, because next time we're diving into an even crazier billionaire takeover story. Power moves never looked this good. The fight for respect, a billionaire's ultimate power move. Before we dive in, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you love stories of perseverance, power, and redemption, you're going to love this one. Stay until the end, because this story, it's going to blow your mind. The night everything changed. The night Celeste Hart arrived at the Grand Astoria. She wasn't expecting a battle. She was expecting luxury. She was expecting respect. And above all, she was expecting a room. But instead, she got humiliation. Dressed in simple yet elegant attire, Celeste walked through the towering golden doors, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The lobby was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, plush velvet seating arranged in intimate clusters, the faint aroma of fresh lilies in the air. She should have felt at home in a place like this. After all, she had worked her entire life to be able to afford places like this. But the moment she stepped to the front desk, she could feel it. The stare, the unspoken judgment, and when she gave her name, the receptionist, A sharp-faced man named Damian Pierce didn't even try to hide his skepticism. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Damian said, not even looking at her reservation. "I don't see your name in the system." Celeste blinked. "That can't be right. My assistant booked it over a month ago." Damian sighed, clicking lazily at the keyboard. He barely tried. "I'm afraid there's nothing under heart," he said, flashing her the fakest polite smile she had ever seen. Celeste's stomach tightened. It was happening again. She had seen this before. The microaggressions, the way people's eyes swept over her, looking for indicators of wealth, of status, as if her presence alone wasn't enough. She pulled out her phone, opened her email, and held it up. "Here's my confirmation. Paid in advance. Penthouse suite." Damian's patronizing smirk didn't falter. "I'm sorry, Miss Hart, but we're fully booked tonight." Lies. Celeste knew damn well they weren't fully booked. And the worst part? She saw the way he looked at the couple behind her. A well-dressed pair, dripping in designer labels. When they walked up, Damian's entire demeanor shifted. Smiling, respectful, eager to please. That's when Celeste knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. She stood there, fists clenched, heat rising to her face. She could have caused a scene, could have demanded a manager, but instead, she turned around and walked out. Not because she was defeated, because she was calculating. Because this wasn't over. The takeover begins. Celeste wasn't just any woman. She was a powerhouse, a self-made billionaire, a woman who had built an empire from scratch, proving every doubter wrong along the way. And when she got back into her car that night, she made a decision. A decision that would change everything. She was going to buy the Grand Astoria. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but to make a statement that no one, no matter how wealthy, how successful, deserved to be made to feel small. She called her legal team that night. "I want the Grand Astoria," she said. "Make it happen." And 2 months later, they did. The return. The day Celeste walked back into the Grand Astoria, she wasn't just another guest. She was the owner. She had bought the entire hotel. Staff, operations, everything. And now, she was going to clean house. She arrived unannounced, dressed in a sleek black power suit, her presence commanding attention. Every step she took through the lobby sent a shockwave through the room. Because this time, the staff recognized her. They remembered, especially Damian. The moment he saw her, his face drained of color. Celeste smiled. Slow, dangerous. "Hello, Damian," she said smoothly, resting her manicured nails on the counter. Damian swallowed, eyes darting around like a trapped animal. Miss Hart, You don't have to worry about checking me in," she cut him off. "I'm not a guest." He blinked. "I own this hotel now." Silence. The entire lobby froze. Damian's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out, no. Celeste pulled a folder from her purse and placed it on the counter. "Here's the ownership agreement." Damian stared at the official document, hands shaking as he read through the pages. His face went white. Celeste leaned in. "Do you remember telling me this hotel was fully booked?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. Damian stammered. "Miss Hart, I had no idea who you were." Celeste's smile sharpened. "That's the problem," and she let the words hang in the air before delivering the final blow. "You're fired. A new era begins." Celeste wasted no time transforming the Grand Astoria. She made immediate changes. New staff, new policies, a zero-tolerance rule for discrimination. She rehired employees who had been unfairly let go. She implemented diversity training, ensuring that no one would ever experience what she had. And as for Damien? Well, he left in disgrace, his name now synonymous with failure. Celeste stood in the penthouse suite that night, the very room she had been denied before, and gazed out at the city below. This wasn't just about winning. It was about changing the game. And she had done just that. If you loved this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Do you think Celeste got the justice she deserved? What would you have done in her place? Drop your thoughts below. And don't forget, power moves like this? They don't just happen. They're made. Stay tuned for more stories of revenge, power, and ultimate takeovers. The ultimate power move. A CEO's sweet revenge. Before we start, tell us, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong, just because someone else decided you weren't the right kind of person? If so, you're going to love this story. Hit that like button to show support for our main character, and drop a comment below if you think she did the right thing in the end. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of power, revenge, and ultimate takeovers. Now let's dive in. The night that changed everything. When Ava Sinclair arrived at the Rosewood Grand, she wasn't looking for a fight. She was looking for rest. She had just stepped off a 15-hour flight, exhausted from back-to-back business meetings across the world. All she wanted was a warm shower, a soft bed, and maybe a glass of champagne in the penthouse suite she had booked over a month ago. But instead, she got disrespected. The moment she walked up to the front desk, she knew something was wrong. The receptionist, a sharp-faced woman named Lisa, barely looked up. She tapped lazily at the computer, her bored expression making it clear she had already judged Ava before even speaking to her. Ava cleared her throat. "I have a reservation. Under Sinclair." Lisa finally glanced up. Then she paused. A quick flick of the eyes. Up and down. Assessing. Ava wasn't dressed in designer labels tonight. Just a pair of comfortable slacks, a sleek turtleneck, and flats. But her presence alone should have told Lisa everything. Ava owned a multi-billion-dollar company. She had built an empire from the ground up. She could buy this entire hotel chain if she wanted to. And yet, Lisa gave her that look, the same one Ava had seen 1,000 times before, back when she was just a nobody trying to prove herself in a world that didn't want to take her seriously. Lisa sighed dramatically. "I don't see a reservation for you," she said. Ava's stomach tightened. "That's not possible," she said, keeping her voice even. "It was booked by my assistant a month ago, paid in full." Lisa's fake smile never wavered. "Sorry, but we're completely booked tonight." Lies. Ava had seen the vacancies online just before arriving. She glanced over Lisa's shoulder at the monitor. There, right there, were open rooms. Yet Lisa was so confident Ava wouldn't call her out. Because in her mind, Ava wasn't the kind of person who belonged in a place like this. Ava felt the familiar sting of being underestimated, dismissed, disrespected. But she had learned something long ago. She wasn't the kind of woman who argued for her worth. She was the kind of woman who made people regret ever doubting her. The ultimate power move. Ava walked out of the Rosewood Grand that night. Not because she was defeated, because she was planning her next move. As soon as she got into her car, she made one call to her attorney. "I want to buy the Rosewood Grand," she said, her voice calm, controlled, deadly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ava, That's a massive investment." She smirked. "Then let's make sure it's worth every penny." And just like that, the wheels were in motion. 1 month later, the grand reveal. The day Ava walked back into the Rosewood Grand, she wasn't just another guest. She was the new owner. The deal had closed faster than anyone expected. Because, as it turned out, the hotel chain had financial issues. They had been losing money for months, desperate for a buyer. And Ava, she had swooped in at the perfect moment. She arrived dressed in power, a sleek, custom-tailored black suit that screamed unstoppable. She didn't need to announce herself. Her presence alone was enough. Lisa was still behind the front desk when Ava walked in. And the moment she saw her face went white. Because she knew. Ava didn't even have to say a word. She just smiled. A slow, calculated smile. "Hello, Lisa," she said smoothly, resting her perfectly manicured hand on the counter. Lisa swallowed hard. "Miss Sinclair, Ava tilted her head. "Funny, you had no idea who I was just a few weeks ago," she said. "But now suddenly you do." Lisa's hands trembled. Ava slid a folder across the counter. The official ownership documents. "Let me make this easy for you," Ava said. "I own this hotel now, and you're fired." Lisa sputtered, her face a mix of shock, fear, and humiliation. "But, please, I didn't—" Ava's smile never wavered. "You made your choice," she said simply. And then, she turned on her heel and walked away. Just like that. The new Rosewood Grand. Ava wasted no time in transforming the Rosewood Grand. The first thing she did? Fire every single person who had fostered an environment of discrimination and elitism. The second thing? Hired a new staff. People who understood that luxury and respect should never be mutually exclusive. And the final touch? She made one rule crystal clear. This hotel was a place for everyone. No more dismissing people based on assumptions. No more gatekeeping luxury. Because true power isn't about making people feel small. It's about lifting people up. What do you think? Did Ava do the right thing? If you think she was justified, drop A in the comments. Or if you think she went too far, let's hear why. And don't forget, like this video to show support for women who take charge and demand the respect they deserve. Subscribe for more stories of power, revenge, and ultimate takeovers. Because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. The price of power. A CEO's hardest battle. Before we dive in, let's talk. Have you ever had everything in your life perfectly planned out, only to have it ripped away in an instant? Have you ever faced a challenge so big that it felt like the universe was testing you, just to see if you were really strong enough? If you've ever been pushed to your limit and forced to fight back, hit that like button to show support. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in this situation? Now, let's get into it. The beginning of the end. For Isabella Carter, life was finally falling into place. After years of relentless hard work, she had just pulled off the biggest deal of her career. She wasn't just any CEO. She was the youngest female billionaire in the industry, a woman who had built an empire from scratch. Tonight, she was supposed to be celebrating. A lavish gala was being held in her honor at one of the most exclusive hotels in New York City. She arrived dressed to kill. A sleek, floor-length black gown, diamond earrings that sparkled under the chandeliers, and an aura of unshakable confidence. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. Just as she was about to take the stage to give her speech, her phone vibrated in her clutch. She wouldn't have checked it. Except for one thing. It was from her CFO, Daniel. Urgent. Call me now." Her stomach dropped. Daniel was the calm one, the numbers guy, the man who never panicked. So if he was panicking now, something was very, very wrong. The fall. She stepped away from the crowd, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors as she found a quiet corner. She hit call. Daniel answered on the first ring. "Isabella," his voice was tight, urgent. "We have a problem, a massive one." Her fingers tightened around her clutch. "Tell me," she demanded. Daniel hesitated. "You're being investigated for fraud." Her breath caught. "What?" Her mind raced. Fraud? That was impossible. Every deal, every contract, every investment. She had been careful. But Daniel kept going. "The SEC just launched an investigation into your company. They're claiming financial misconduct. Isabella, they're saying you've been falsifying profits." A sharp ringing filled her ears. Falsifying profits? That was a lie. She had built her empire with her own 2 hands. She had played by the rules. And now? Someone was trying to destroy everything she had worked for. She took a shaky breath. Who started this? Daniel hesitated. She knew what that meant. He didn't want to tell her, which meant it was worse than she thought. "Daniel," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "Who did this?" There was a pause. Then, "It's coming from inside the company," he admitted. Her blood ran cold. Someone on her own team had betrayed her. The enemy within. The next 24 hours were a nightmare. Her lawyers were scrambling. Her board of directors was panicking. And the media? They were eating her alive. Billionaire CEO accused of fraud. Isabella Carter under investigation. Scandal shakes the business world. Is this the end of her empire? Every headline, every news outlet, every social media platform. They had already judged her guilty. And the worst part? She still didn't know who had done this to her. Until she did. The ultimate betrayal. 3 days later, she found out the truth. And it hit her like a freight train. It was her COO, Lucas, the man she had trusted the most, the man she had built this company with, the man she had loved. Before she learned that love and business didn't mix. She had ended things with him a year ago, kept things professional. Or so she thought. Now? She knew the truth. Lucas hadn't just wanted her out of the company. He wanted to destroy her completely. And he had been planning it for months. The confrontation. She didn't bother with lawyers or board meetings. She went straight to his office. He looked too comfortable. Sitting in her chair, sipping her whiskey, like he had already won. He didn't even look surprised when she walked in. "You finally figured it out," he said, leaning back. A slow, sickening smile spread across his face. Her hands curled into fists. "Why?" she demanded, her voice sharp, raw. Lucas sighed. "Come on, Isabella. You had to know it would end this way." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you've beaten me," she said. Lucas tilted his head, considering her. "Haven't I?" Her pulse pounded. For the first time in years, Isabella Carter was on the brink of losing everything. Her company, her reputation, her legacy. But then? She smiled. The comeback no one saw coming. Lucas thought he was the smartest person in the room. But Isabella? She had one last move to make. Because while he had been plotting against her, she had been documenting everything. Every shady deal he had made behind her back. Every under-the-table agreement he thought no one knew about. And before she had stepped into his office, she had sent every single document to the SEC. So when the FBI walked in just minutes later, it was Lucas they arrested, not her. And as they dragged him out, his face pale, eyes wide, she finally leaned in and whispered, "You never should have underestimated me." What do you think? Did Isabella handle it like a boss? Or should she have done something different? Tell us in the comments. Hit like to show support for strong women who refuse to be taken down. And don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. This was just the beginning.